Okay, welcome everybody. This is a webinar for the book with author. The presenters are Natasha and Ilene, and in a minute they will introduce themselves. I want just to very quick welcome you in the name of the Taos Institute. We are an organization that promotes social construction ideas. We also have our mission is to create spaces for learning and sharing what you do about social construction. So this webinar is one example of that. We have in our website also the world share books, which means that anything that the associates are written about social construction is shared at not cost. So you can download free books and other materials. Today is Friday, May 11, and I will just explain very fast that if you want to talk, you can unmute yourself. And if you are not talking, we prefer that you stay muted so we not have like background noise. This webinar is sponsored by the Taos Institute, and we will have our celebration in November, the 25th anniversary. So everybody is welcome to attend to see what's going on with social construction ideas. So Natasha and Ilene, do you want to introduce themselves? And then this is ready to go. You can do with this space what you need.
Sure. Eileen, would you like to introduce yourself first? Or I can while you unmute. My name is Natasha.
Okay. Go ahead, Natasha.
Oh, sorry. I am currently an instructor at Indiana State University, and I have been utilizing CMM for over a decade now. I don't like to think I'm getting older, but saying a decade seems to be fun now. I like to use it in the classroom. I like to use it in research. And of course, I fully embody it as a worldview and use concepts from it daily. I'm excited
so
about the webinar. Go
Natasha.
ahead. Yes.
So my name is, I think I'm going to, my name is Ilene Wasserman. Because it was echoing a little bit. I live in Philadelphia, and I am mostly a practitioner. I also teach organizational development and leadership at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. And I am also a senior leadership fellow at Wharton, the University of Pennsylvania. And I am very excited to be joining in this conversation about the I'd like to say just a little bit about the process of coming to the creation of the book series. As many
Ilene, since in my computer you are frozen, just wait a sec. I don't know if the others are frozen too. I will mute you in the computer, and I will unmute you in your cell phone. Let's try again. Yeah, please. Sorry, you can continue.
Okay. I think that I joined Natasha. Oh, I'm muted now. Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
No, you are unmuted in your cell phone. So you keep talking, don't worry.
Okay. So I think I joined Natasha in appreciation for the construction and creation of the Coordinated Management of Meaning by Barnett Pierce and Bernd Cronin. And it was their intention, and continues to be their intention, for this to be an emergent theory that is continuing to be evolving in how it's applied in different contexts, and that the meaning of the theoretical, the practical theory is totally aligned with the principles, which is that all of us that touch it, engage it, embody it, are continuing to contribute to how it is used to create better social worlds. So I think what we want to do is start out a little bit by just seeing who is in the room, so to speak, and get a sense of how we will tailor our conversation. And we do hope that this is very much a facilitated conversation. So if we could look at the chat box and have you just to everyone indicate on a continuum of scholarship and research and applied practice work, where do your interests lie?
Are we waiting?
Hello?
Slides, right?
Yes. So I'm waiting for you to enter into the chat box, whether you're more interested in a conversation that leans toward application and practice, or research and scholarship. If you would. This helps us. I'm putting the question in the box.
Hello, I am
Okay.
Maria. Hello,
Yes.
I am Maria Muñoz Grandes. I live in Philadelphia too. I have been a psychotherapist for 24 years, and I am working since 2015 also in organizational development, and also doing some research on leadership development at the Fowler Center for Business as an Agent of World Benefit. So I am interested in all aspects of the coordinated management of meaning applications for practitioners, and also research, very interested in the research process.
Thank you, Maria, and maybe we could have this conversation and continue this conversation in person. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that people are wonderful.
Hooray, lots of research interests. I love it. Love it. I'm excited.
Yes.
Now let's see here. Let's see.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Dialogical research.
Yeah.
Research and scholarship.
Natasha, I am thinking, I see research and I see both.
Okay.
My suggestion, and Natasha and I are planning this along with you, my suggestion is that we start with you introducing the way in which you introduce CMM in research, and I could, as a bridge to communicating possibilities, I could talk about my research that is applied in the context of organizational development, leadership, and community. How is that?
That sounds great.
Okay.
All right. Would you like me to switch to the PowerPoint or keep me up?
I think to the degree to which it's useful to you.
Okay. Let's see here.
Why don't you share your screen with the PowerPoint just to anchor the conversation? How is that?
That sounds great. Step one. Let's see if I can do it again. Did I do it correctly? Yes.
Yes.
All right, awesome. So I love that everyone's interested in research, because the sole purpose in writing this book was to aid and assist in people that look at CMM and know that it pulls you in, you're interested in it, but think, where do I get started? How do I use this? And I know I used to ask the question, am I using it correctly? Does this make sense? Am I actually making better social worlds? So through that conversation, we thought, well, it's really using the theory as practice. And hopefully some of the stories that we'll share and some of the examples in the text provide context where you can see how we kind of made sense through it. And by we, of course, I'm referring to Dr. Stephen Littlejohn. And we also had another colleague that I will give credit to, Nick Noblet, who that assisted us in the dialogue of creating this text. So let's see here. Now I don't know how to click on the PowerPoint. How?
Maybe it's in the bottom.
Oh, there it goes. Maybe. Bottom. Okay, so I think for the purpose of skipping this, we might have to jump around a little bit, Eileen.
Jump as you may.
Okay. So maybe we can stay on this slide for a while, but seeing patterns in communication. So I am really interested in looking at healthcare teams and specifically how they deliver difficult news, right? And I'm sure if you study any kind of health communication that maybe you're familiar with the research surrounding difficult news. However, how do we, our healthcare practitioners, coordinate together to deliver a diagnosis, right? And this was a very practical and important topic. So I used SIVA, which was typically a practitioner application in a research context, and starting off with storyboarding, just getting as much information as I can. So as I talk through kind of my experience with this model of CMM in research, maybe you can think about it too in whatever context of research that you're interested in, right? So I think we as CMMers, or those who are CMM-ish, like to think, how do I understand this? How do participants in this community or in this organization understand their everyday social worlds, right? So the storyboarding event allows us to just ask those questions that we're interested in, to observe. And then enriching, as we know and understand communication to be not linear, but to be interactive and cyclical, you enrich your story as you're going on, right? So the E in SIVA, enriching. And then once we enrich to where we can say, I have enough understanding to where this is kind of making sense to me. I understand the patterns of communication that are being used in order to facilitate the process. Then we can get into the analysis part. So let's see what's going on and where are the areas of concern that the practitioners have, right? Not my concerns, but maybe where are some areas that are bifurcation points, right? That people are making choices that lead to the same unwanted repetitive pattern, if you will, or a pattern that just isn't exactly where the team wants to go. And just by presenting this story that has been enriched for analysis by the team's eyes and reflection, then they can kind of create a vision of their own, right? Okay, and I just kind of think this is a neat tool for research, because in this visioning step, at this point, you spend a lot of time with this in this social world, with the people, with in my case, the professionals, and you kind of work as a we, as we know communication is very much socially constructed, to say and see, yeah, these are the areas that came about during this research. And then the last step is really putting the practical element there, action, right? From the visioning, from the concerns that developed, what action is reasonable, realistic, that will make this context, these patterns of communication more effective and end in a better social world. So that's one, that's kind of my go-to method when using CMM in research. But I hope as I was talking, you can see that it goes hand in hand with many other tools from the theory, from unwanted repetitive patterns. Whenever you're analyzing using concerns, visions, and actions, the triangle, CVA, to some of the other models that we can talk about, the loop model, the daisy model as well. So I hope that's a good starting point, but I don't want to just continue to talk about one context. Is there a way that
maybe?
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to ask if there's a way that I could also see the chat box, because I cannot see it in the screen.
You will not be able to see it in the screen, but once you get the alert of the chat, what you can do is click the chat icon, and then you will be able to see on your screen the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, as you talk, just when you see the notification on the menu bar on the bottom, just click the chat icon, and then you will see what people is posting.
I'm sorry, I just can't see the menu bar at the bottom. That's where let me see. Oh.
Yeah, if you put your mouse, you know, like drag your mouse to the bottom. Can you see now?
No, but it's okay. I just hope that you will tell me if I'm missing something in the chat box.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry. So far, people is introducing themselves. So if someone asks a question or want to make a comment, I will let you know.
Perfect. Thank you. Eileen, is this a good transition for you to talk a little bit about your research?
I can see that. I will unmute her. Let me see. Eileen, are you there? Yeah, no, I can see she's trying to talk. No, I don't know why. We cannot hear.
I apologize to everyone in the chat or in the webinar for our technical difficulties today. I'm very sorry.
I think we need to inform Eileen that her phone was disconnected. Yeah, there?
I say that because
her phone, I think.
And bifurcation on the people that were part of my research in an action learning process, where we looked at patterns that were virtuous patterns, that were conflict, and what were the patterns that enabled people to really learn from each other in ways that were transformative for them. So I recently wrote an article for a qualitative research collection, and I called the article Participants as Collaborators. And so what you see on the screen is the model Lauren, and if I was channeling Barnett right now, that there are lots of ways of organizing, approaching your research and your practice this way. And Steva, as Natasha mentioned, is one acronym, and Beth and I introduced NOR in Communicating Possibilities as that cyclical process of noticing, observing, reflecting, engaging, and noticing again. The chapters of the book Communicating Possibilities are in. I'll just add one more model to highlight that.
Eileen, can you hear me? This is Monica. Can you?
Eileen, we're having.
So Natasha, can I ask for a favor? Can you call her? Because she thinks she's using the cell phone. Her cell phone got a lot of.
Okay.
Look at these models as, in some ways, pages of vellum that shine a light on different aspects of emerging meaning. And so the loop model, which we affectionately call the storytelling model, invites questioning and circular questioning around such questions as what is the storytelling here, and what do we not get? what are the untellable? That there are rules or forces here that are kind of taking us, steering
Natasha,
us
can
in a
I ask you a
direction.
favor?
Yes.
Could you please
To
share your screen?
ask those
I'm trying to get back to the menu where I can see it. It's awful.
Yeah, you can unshare your screen on the top.
Right, I can't even get back to that screen. Oh, it's because it's on this computer. Stop sharing. Okay.
Yeah, sorry to let you unshare, but let me see, where is she? So now she's muted. But what I want is that because she cannot see the faces, I think she was unaware that she was cutting.
Yeah.
So
Enter your party number that be followed by you are in the meeting now.
Ilene, can you write in the chat if you are able to listen to us? Okay. Who is on the cell phone on the call? Who is on the phone? Ilene, are you on the phone?
I am on the phone.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but we were trying to let you know that while you were presenting on your research, you were cutting. So we missed like 5 minutes of everything you were saying. So I am muting your computer and unmuting your.
I'm muting my computer and talking on the phone.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the best way to go. And I asked Natasha to stop sharing their screen, so you were able to see that we were trying to communicate you about the technical issues. So now, sorry to interrupt what you were saying. We just wanted to let you know, and I think now it's flowing. So please go ahead.
All right, Eileen, I hope you can maybe reshare with us a little bit about what you were saying, since we could not hear you.
Okay, where did you lose me? When I started talking about the research?
We heard a little bit about Norin, but I really think that was the only thing that was clear.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Sorry about the technical difficulties. What I was building on what you were saying, Natasha, and saying that when I use CMM to engage in research, I both used it with the participants. Recently wrote a chapter about this in a qualitative research collection called Participants as Collaborators. And I basically introduced them to CMM, and we looked together at their experience of working or being in dialogue, and being in dialogue across group level differences. And we use the different tools and models. For example, one of the groups I worked with was an interfaith dialogue, and there was a woman in the group who had shared an episode that happened to her on the morning of September 11th, and she was a Pakistani physician who walked into her hospital care meeting after being in surgery all morning, so she didn't know what happened when the tragedy happened in the United States, and she walked into the room, and she shared with the dialogue group that immediately she experienced people relating to her group level identity in a different way. So what the research looked at was what happened when she shared this story in the group and what unfolded in the group. And so we, together as a group, used a reflective cycle of noticing, observing, reflecting, engaging, and noticing again around looking at what were the ways in which people's group level identities interacted with each other. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, I can.
So I want to take this, the Communicating Possibilities book is organized around the chapters. The first chapter is notice, the second is observe, the third is reflect, the fourth is engage, and the fifth is notice again. And clearly, for any of us that have used CMM, you know that it is a cyclical process, and it is far from linear. And as Natasha said when she talked about you looking at unwanted repetitive patterns, you can look at any of these models, the daisy model, the serpentine model, the loop model, and the hierarchy model, and they almost are like folding over each other. And what they do is they shine a light on what are the different ways in which we create the patterns, and what are the more desirable patterns that we want to live into, and how do we do that together. So I want to pause because I know that Natasha and I have been talking, and we're about halfway through the conversation we have together. I want to see if there are any specific questions, or if there's anything about what either Natasha or I have touched on that you would like us to talk about further. If you would type that into the chat box, I'd appreciate that. While they're doing that, Natasha, I don't know if there's something that you want to build on from what we've already been talking about while we're waiting for people to do that?
Sure. And I hope you'll clue me in on the chat conversation since I can't see it. But since we're talking about research and different ways of utilizing CMM and methods, I will just give an example of the DAISY model, even starting off with something that you're interested in and saying, I know CMM can be impactful in this context or this community, but I'm not sure how. Well, starting off with your main concern at the center of the DAISY, and then filling in the pieces. You know, what is connected here? What am I noticing? What is the story being built? And from that, I really think it just kind of comes about that you realize there are some stories that are untold, right? And then you might build on the loop model. Why are these stories untold? Is there a point of concern here? And then use that to go back to the DAISY to fill in all the pieces of the petal, if you will, and present that to the community. Because as Ilene is mentioning, it's a we, it's a participant, but it's a community of communicators that are creating and understanding this world together, because we know as social constructionists that our observation, our decision to look at something impacts what we're looking at, right? So presenting that as a we, getting feedback, getting ideas, using a reflecting team of community members that are able to look at what you've observed and your understanding and saying, yeah, that's what's going on, is a great approach to any research.
Yeah, and I'll kind of take that as a bridge to practice as well, because when you're looking at a situation, in research, you may say, what have people said about this in the past? What has been done in the past? And then ask yourselves, what are the different contexts? What are the different layers of meaning? And what would happen if we shifted the order? So for example, if when we're talking about dialogue, a number of you have mentioned that you do dialogic processes and dialogic research. So in my research, I look at dialogue engaging social identity group differences. And so in the past, people have looked at these differences from a power relationship. People have looked at these differences from the ways in which their historical, their stories as group identity have interacted in the past. And so what are the other hierarchies that we could shine a light on that may expand the future possibilities of what we're creating together? And so one of the, I could just take a recent incident that happened in our city here in Philadelphia, when two gentlemen were confronted by police officers because a manager in a coffee shop, Starbucks, was concerned that they were not paying customers and they were sitting in the coffee shop. Well, it's really interesting to say, so what is the storytelling? And using the loop model and say, what is the storytelling here? The storytelling that the manager was doing was that people, that these two men were there and that they didn't belong there. So then you want to ask the question that you might want to put in the center of the daisy bottle, what does belonging at Starbucks look like, you know? And then look at the hierarchy of meaning. Are we looking at like, what are the ways in which we construct who belongs, where, when, how? What are the different ways that we could look at the history that this manager was bringing to the situation that was different than the police officers, that may have been different from the customers. So, you know, it's one of the wonderful things that each of these models and tools do is help you think about a line and a circle of questioning and support that.
Natasha, I can see, and Ilene, I can see the chat. There is one question for you from the participants. So just let me tell you very fast. In your menu on the top, where it says about your screen, should be an option that it says View Options. If you click View Options, there is one that it says not complete a screen or something like that. But if you can click there and see there is many options. Like one option is to see your slides to the left and the chat to the right, so you can monitor the chat. If not, don't worry, I will let you know. But right now, Burak is asking you a question. So Burak, do you want to jump in and ask your question, or do you want that we read your question? And then Mark is on the queue. Maybe.
So can I, so I see the question of, can you explain why untold stories are important within this context? And I also see the question that's asking and exploring what are the implications of a nonlinear approach to research, the uncertainty it brings forth, which is both a challenge and an opportunity. So what I'd like to do is look at the question first about the untold stories. Would you be interested in saying more about your question, and can we unmute Brad? Monica?
Sure. Well, the CMM model is an alternative to traditional communication methods, right? And my question is to discover, uncover, and learn. So I'm trying to understand the value of the CMM is to obviously to actually get participants tell their stories, so they there is a higher level of engagement, participation, ownerships, etc. But I'm trying to understand incremental value of CMM, you know, by reaching out to untold stories. Is there any research that tells us, well, here's a context where we use CMM by capturing untold stories, that the value of the community has increased by X unit, whatever, however you measure that.
Brooke, thank you for your question, and I hope I can jump in, and then Eileen, if you add to enhance my response. When you're talking, I'm thinking constantly about how the stories in the research process change from an untold story to a telling story to a told story. So I am not aware of current research that has published any quantitative findings of measuring of the impact of 25 untold stories leading to a significant difference. However, I can tell you throughout the process of working, I'll use the healthcare team example again, that by sharing an untold story that happened to discuss, how do I say this, the shift in language became a telling story that became a critical point, a bifurcation point for deciding on how the team would go forward. And I'll explain that a little bit more. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the DSM, but recently the DSM switched, and the requirements for autism spectrum disorders shifted from five categories to 3 categories. And the professionals were talking about it in the old DSM-4 language. And by looking at the stories, it was an untold story because they weren't aware that that was happening, that some people were still using the old criteria and some people were using the new criteria. But by making it a telling story, it was able to become a critical point, a point of concern, and then creating a different story in a better social world that way. I hope that helps. Eileen?
Oh, the medical context is a great context for that. And I'm trying to think about a way to address the second question as a, kind of a continuation of this, where your example, Natasha, shows that we're not just saying this is an untold story, this is a told story. It's constantly, the reason that you have the arrows is because things are moving. And once you once you move into something being a telling story, or you tell a story, then immediately what gets elicited is more questions. So somebody is telling you, and then there's this, I call it the, very scientifically, the like what just happened moment, where you're in the logic flow and then all of a sudden something turns. And it creates a sense, you go from being in coordination, which is, a basic concept of CMM, the coordinated management of meaning. You're in coordination, and you suddenly find yourself in mystery because something doesn't make sense. And so if you step back and kind of use the models as a scaffolding, as almost a way of to kind of orient yourself and help yourself ask what questions would be helpful right now that would reconnect with coordinating with this with these relationships. And those questions could be about what hierarchy of meaning, what are the different contexts. So in the situation of healthcare, or mental health, it may be, a story about identity. It may be a story about family. It may be a story about the larger context. It may be something, if you move to the serpentine model, it may be something that happened in the next turn. But it's there's a continuous process, for those of you familiar with circular questions, of kind of stepping back and noticing the different questions that you might ask that will create the story that's told, help you understand what are the unknown, untold stories, and create the next moment, the better moment.
I guess I'll continue on with the second question from Mark. And Mark, thank you for your compliment earlier. I greatly appreciate it. But I think, yes, creativity can stem from this idea of uncertainty. Talking about another research project, I had the opportunity of going to Wrocław, Poland for 3 summers in a row from 2008 to 2010. And I was very curious about the, student perspective of civic engagement. And I knew in Indiana that civic engagement was a large push, right? And we really wanted students to get involved and give back to the community and learn how to apply the classroom concepts to our lives. And so I go to Wrocław and I'm talking to students and exploring, but I'm not really sure if it's going to be significant, if there's going to be an impact, or what will happen. I mean, 3 years later, not imposing my ideas, but asking how students are involved in their community, asking different questions, good questions, and also answering questions, led to, of course, close relationships with students at that university, but also a creation of an organization designed for getting students involved with the community. So I do not claim that I was the reason for that organization development, but what I can say is that utilizing CMM to ask the questions, to look for understanding and creating that interest did lead to something great. And it all stemmed from the uncertainty and possibility of creativity. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. Linda, want to introduce yourself?
Oh, so Linda, did Linda just? Monica, you're asking if Linda wants to introduce herself?
In the chat, yes, but I see that she just joined, and we have still 10 minutes, so I don't know how do you want to.
Okay. Well, I would, in the 10 minutes that we have left, what I want to suggest is that we look at some of the other questions that people have in introducing themselves, and so there are some questions about doing research on psychotherapy, and then there are some are there other questions that people want to make sure that we address in the 10 minutes that we have left?
Okay, so what about if you unshare your screen? Maybe that would be easier, so you can see all the faces, and then people can just jump in, since we are a small group. Yeah. So
Great idea.
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, I can see the chat now. Okay.
And then you can see the chat, you can see everybody, and you can like moderate your own questions.
Great.
Thank you, Monica.
Mark, I see your follow-up question about untold stories becoming new in different kind of contexts, for the other stories being told, not told, and so on. I don't know if I can answer that, or if I already answered it. Could you maybe elaborate, or if I need to elaborate?
Oh, hi, Natasha. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Actually, looking at it, I'm not sure if it's a question. Actually, I think I was just listening to Ilene and to that question that Burak had about. What I understood was why I ask about untold stories, and I was just thinking, well, it's I suppose it's about, for me, I suppose my understanding of CMM will be it's about the stories, but it's really also about the relationship between the stories, isn't it? And as soon as you begin to ask those questions, then those relationships begin to change. So the untold story. I mean, it was a context. It was a context that maybe wasn't talked about, but it becomes a different kind of space within which to view the other things the other meanings that that people are living within, I suppose. So yeah, it wasn't really a question.
Okay, sorry, I saw the question mark, so I wasn't sure, but yes, thank you for
Oh,
elaborating.
I suppose the question mark was my probably very English way of trying of
To
sort
see
of
if it
putting
makes
it out
sense.
there tentatively, you know, of not saying that's the truth.
Oh,
You know, Mark, that reminds me, it's a really good example of how when people say, I'm sorry, I can't make the meeting, tell me what happened, you know, or people look at an episode as, you know, in the transmission model as opposed to the relational communication model, which is very much about meaning is always emerging, and being there counts, because being there is what creates the next moment together.
Yes, we're not just uncovering these stories, are we? We're not just sort of uncovering and saying, "Aha, this has been untold all this time."
right.
Where, as you say, it's sort of generative, isn't it? It's
Yes.
yeah.
Great. Eileen, I'm not sure if you saw the question from Brooke. He was asking about organizational development. So providing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for calling that to my attention. I was talking and not reading. Barack, there is, when you talk about merger integration, and the use of stories, I'll give you one example, and then I'm happy to talk more about it offline with you, is that when you have a merger, oftentimes the attention is paid to the finances and the legal and structural aspects. The storytelling aspect is so important. An example is I was doing some work with a pharmaceutical company, and as you probably well know, that when there is a merger, what happens is the stories of each, the identity stories of each of the organizations becomes valorized, and all of a sudden it's an us and a them, and this is the way we do it, and the good old days become, in some ways, the highest context. And so one of the ways in which I have used CMM is in concert with appreciative inquiry processes. They're very, very complementary, but in the way of looking at when we come together, what is the story that what is the future that we're trying to create? In what ways have we known that in our respective organizations? What are the strengths that we bring to that? And that's in some ways a way of structuring the storytelling in a way that's creating episodes of joining and creating and being generative together. So in that process, what you notice is what are the patterns that are unfolding? What are the patterns of storytelling? And then how do you, keeping in mind the future that you're creating together and the intent of be able to name and frame the context that you're calling out, and what is most important to create alignment across organizations. That's kind of me giving you an example in, I don't know, 2 minutes, and I'm happy to talk more about that, or if you want to after this call.
Thank you very much. I'll send you an email. Thank you. Great.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
And Eileen, just for the sake of, I guess, me trying to facilitate another question we missed, is it Oriana? Your question about working with postgraduate students? I'm not sure if you want to speak a little bit more about that. Sorry, I'm sorry, Eileen, I was talking to her, but I'm not sure if she can unmute or if we have time.
Oriana, ¿quieres hablar? Puedes quitarte el mute y participar. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
I wanted to make sure we did
Oriana?
your question.
The question?
Okay.
That was, or I guess it wasn't really a question. It was talking about your interests and wanted to see if you had any questions more specifically about dialogical research that we could answer for you regarding the therapeutic process.
No, I haven't a question. For
Oh.
me, it's very interesting. Listen,
Okay.
but okay.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't skip you. Thank you. Are there any other questions that we missed out of the chat? Let's see here. I don't think so.
Well, if you don't have any other questions, what we can do is I'm recording the session. So after that, you will have it and you can distribute it and will be posted on link so people can go back to them. And also I assume they have your emails and contact info in case you want to continue the conversation online. And you can still continue, like you can continue using link. I know that this was this week, but you can still go back, put more questions, and you can monitor that if you are receiving the notifications. So, so yes, I don't know if you want to say some last words.
Sure, I'll give you the pleasure.
Natasha, do you want to say more?
Oh, go ahead, and then I can say thank you afterwards.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just hope that you will continue this conversation because as CMMers, and I hope we all embody that CMMerness, if you will, that we know that the conversation cannot stop here and that we must continue to evolve this theory and use it as a practice to continue to enhance our lives. And one of the conversation questions this week was, how do we get others to know about CMM? How do we show them this? And really, I think the great answer is to keep talking about it, to share our research interests, to share our research successes, to share these books, and to challenge or maybe just ask good questions to others and get them thinking, and to be a role model of CMM as a worldview by living out this in our daily lives.
Yeah. So I'm going to just share a couple of very practical things. First, thank you all for making the time and joining us. And I always wish that this would be one of more, because there's always some kinks that we learn about how to do this better. And I would love to have the opportunity to, kind of continue the conversation. I want to say just on a practical level that there is a small group of us who are going to be having a conversation about the bridges of CMM and family therapy and the Milan method. And if anybody will be interested in joining that conversation, just send me an email and I will join you in. And Dawn and Monica, I know that there have been several people that were interested in this conversation this week, but it was not a good week. So we may look for another opportunity to continue that. And the other thing I want to add is that there is something called the CMM Institute and for Human and Social Evolution. And you could find that online, or we could send you a link to that. And there is an annual gathering of a learning exchange where people who are using CMM in research and in their practice gather. And we also have an annual fellowship where people can apply for a modest fellowship, but it's an opportunity to share your work together. And we could let you know about that learning exchange as well. So thank you all for this conversation, and look forward to continuing to learn together.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Ilene and Natasha, are you presenting in November in Cancun about this?
I am.
Let's talk about that offline.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, so thank you everybody, and see you in November in Cancun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Monica.
wonderful. And thank you very much for helping us, Monica.